Okay, so we're going to talk about cultural responsiveness. I'm Heidi Miranda, and this is my presentation on cultural responsiveness. So first of all, what is cultural responsiveness? What does it mean to me? And so I just put some bullet points here. I said to be able to recognize and value differences in cultures in my classroom, to be aware of biases that I might have and that my students may have, to be able to accept the differences and build a classroom culture that can embrace differences and work together as a class, to allow my classroom to be a safe place for all students no matter their cultural background. And now, how will I implement instruction in a culturally responsive classroom? So, number one, I want to take note of cultures that are present in my classroom before I even plan my lessons. That way I can, number two, do my best to make sure that any cultural differences are handled with care and respect while I'm planning out those lessons. Number three, I will allow my classroom to be a safe place for children to ask questions and provide input on their cultural background. Therefore, I'm not going to say, oh, we don't believe in that, or, oh, no, we don't say that in this class. Those kind of things will not be accepted. It'll be more like, oh, that's so interesting, or I can't wait to hear about that. Can you tell us more? Those kind of things, so that the children can feel accepted and ready to share as well. And number four, I will make sure that my teaching is authentic, so I can build those authentic relationships with students, and also so they can see authentic things from different cultures. Sorry, I have to keep moving where my screen is so that you can see the PowerPoint. Passive learning for English language learners. Passive learners learning happens when students are immersed into a new language and a culture, and they are in the phase of learning where they're absorbing language and the culture around them without participating in the learning. So it could mean that they're just sitting and watching, and the teacher's talking a lot. The teacher might be reading a lot of books. They might be seeing a lot of pictures, but they're not ready to engage in that learning yet. They're still just sitting there. It's almost like they're just a vase that's being poured into, or a sponge that's just soaking up all of the information around them. Approaches for teaching English language learners in a culturally responsive classroom. So the first one that I really liked was promoting bilingualism. So that means that we would be sending home newsletters in both languages, the child's home language and the school language, English, but also encouraging students to find books in the library that are in their own language as well as in English. So that way we're not just always constantly saying English, 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 and they're left kind of feeling like, oh, is my language bad? We want them to know that both languages are valued, and kind of encourage that to grow, so that way, because their first language is important and it is their foundation language, they're not feeling like they're not allowed to use it, but that both languages are equally encouraged. And then number two is match instruction levels to students learning of language level 2, language 2 levels. So for beginners in the very early language stage, where they're not yet producing language, we want to make sure that we are providing them with lots of visual support, and allowing them to stay quiet, and not forcing them to produce language when they're not quite ready to do that yet, but providing them with more opportunities to be those passive learners. Whereas as they become a little bit more intermediate or beginning intermediate level, then we can start to expect them to answer one-word answers to questions, or or provide us with short sentences. So we want to provide them with opportunities for that. And then as they become advanced, we want them to be able to have opportunities in classroom to use full sentences and to even tell stories in their language too. And then the third strategy that I really liked was using the child's likes and dislikes to encourage language use. So it's just another way of forming those authentic relationships with students as they are learning a new language. Sometimes if they have something that they're really interested in, they're going to be more likely to want to talk about it, and therefore they will want to learn how to say it in English as well. So considerations for English language learners. Social emotional factors. We need to consider the student's self-esteem and anxiety levels while they are learning a new language. So sometimes learning a new language or going into a new classroom can be a very scary thing for students, and we want to make sure that we're supporting not only their language learning, but also their level of anxiety and their level of self-esteem. We want to make sure that they feel good about themselves and they feel confident, because it's hard to speak a new language if you're not confident. So we want to build up that self-esteem, let them know that they're doing a good job, let them know that we're proud of them and that they are moving forward. Cognitively, we want to think about what are their cognitive and learning styles. That way we're matching their learning style. If this child is not a visual learner, then we don't need to provide them with so many visual cues. Maybe they need more hands-on work in order to learn the language, or maybe they need to hear English over and over again and hear it in different ways in order for them to pick it up. So we need to find out, how do they learn? Do they want to see the big picture first? Do they want it in small steps? And then what is their style? So we need to match those things as well when we're trying to teach them a second language. We also need to take into account social cultural factors. So how is their family acculturation at home, and what is their use of their first and second language? And we need to keep that in mind as we are working with them. So what are the responsibilities of the teacher? So the teacher sets the tone of the classroom. It's the teacher's responsibility to be up to date on the cultural differences of the students in their classroom to ensure that they're being culturally responsive to the best of their ability. This will allow the students to grow and learn in an atmosphere that values who they are and where they came from, while at the same time providing them with opportunities to be successful and proficient in English. We as teachers must connect with students in order to motivate them to learn and grow in their English proficiency. This can only be done if the teacher is making the lessons meaningful and equitable. This means that the teacher must form authentic connections between both cultures. And so my insights gained from this chapter were exposure and immersion are not the answer. That was actually very shocking to me, and it was almost the one that I was going to pick for my journal entry because I had always learned that immersion is the best way for children to learn a new language, which is true, but I didn't realize the amount of hours that it takes in order for them to have a true immersion experience. So that was a very big insight for me. And then also learn a student's strengths in their first language. I loved that takeaway because a lot of times we're looking at their second language so much that we forget to look at what are they good at and how can we measure that? And the best way to measure that is by using their first language. If we're using their second language to always measure how well they're doing in our class, they're obviously going to score lower. So we want to make sure that we're using appropriate measuring devices in the appropriate language. And these are my references that I used for this presentation. And that's it. Thank you.